When did you realize your mother had been slowly poisoning you? I found the rat poison on a Tuesday afternoon while looking for Mom's heating pad. She'd asked me to grab it from her bedroom closet, said her arthritis was acting up again. Classic Mom, always something wrong but never wrong enough to stop her daily tennis matches or book club meetings. I was digging through the usual clutter of old purses and shoe boxes when my fingers brushed against something that didn't belong, a small cardboard container shoved way in the back, behind her winter scarves. Warfarin. The label was faded but legible. Rat and mouse poison. Anticoagulant formula. My hands started shaking before my brain even caught up. The box was nearly empty, just a few blue pellets rattling around in the bottom. The purchase date on the receipt taped to the side was from 3 years ago, March 15, 2019. I remember that month. I'd been preparing for my master's thesis defense when I got hit with what Mom called one of my episodes. Extreme fatigue, nosebleeds that wouldn't stop, bruising that appeared out of nowhere. I'd ended up in the ER twice that week. Sarah? Did you find it? Mom's voice drifted up from downstairs, sweet as always. Still looking. I called back, surprised my voice sounded normal. Inside, everything was spinning. I pulled out my phone and took photos of the box, the receipt, everything. My finger hovered over the container. Such a small thing. Blue pellets no bigger than fish food. How many times had I praised Mom's cooking over the years? Her special Sunday pancakes that she'd make just for me. The homemade soup she'd bring to my apartment whenever I was sick. The protein smoothies she'd started making me drink every morning since I turned 25, claiming they'd help with my constitutional weakness. That's what she'd always called it. My constitutional weakness. Like I was a house built on a bad foundation, doomed to crumble. The doctors could never find anything definitively wrong, my symptoms were always vague, inconsistent. Chronic fatigue. Mystery bruising. Hair loss. Digestive issues. Blood work that showed concerning but not quite diagnostic abnormalities. You're just delicate, sweetheart, Mom would say, stroking my hair while I lay exhausted on her couch again, another job interview missed, another relationship sabotaged by my unreliable health. Some people are made of stronger stuff. But don't worry, I'll always take care of you. The heating pad sat right there on the shelf in front of me, exactly where she said it would be. She'd known I'd find it easily. But she'd forgotten about the shoebox pushed behind it, or maybe she'd grown careless after so many years. 28 years old, and I'd never lived more than 30 minutes from home. Never kept a relationship longer than 8 months, hard to maintain romance when you're constantly canceling dates to sleep off mystery ailments. I'd switched my major from pre-med to English Lit after junior year because I couldn't handle the stress. Dropped out of my first graduate program. Even now, working on my master's in library science, I was behind schedule because of all my sick days. I photographed the receipt again, making sure the date was clear. March 2019. The month I'd been too weak to defend my thesis. The month Mom had suggested I move back home temporarily, just until I felt stronger. I never left. Sarah? Her voice was closer now, probably at the bottom of the stairs. Everything okay up there? I shoved the box back where I'd found it and grabbed the heating pad. Coming, Mom. But I wasn't her fragile little girl anymore. For the first time in my life, I knew exactly what was wrong with me. I made it through dinner that night by pushing food around my plate and claiming I wasn't hungry. Mom frowned with that practiced concern she'd perfected over the years. You're getting too thin again, sweetheart. Your cheekbones are showing. She reached across the table to touch my face, and I had to fight every instinct not to flinch away. Maybe we should make an appointment with Dr. Patterson. Dr. Patterson. The family physician who'd been documenting my constitutional weakness since I was 16. The same doctor who'd referred me to specialist after specialist, none of whom could find the underlying cause of my symptoms. I wondered now how many times Mom had sat in his office, playing the worried mother, describing my latest episode with tears in her eyes. I'm fine, Mom. Just tired from classes. She stood and started clearing dishes. Well, you know what always perks you up. I'll make you one of my protein smoothies in the morning. The recipe with the vanilla powder you like. My stomach clenched. Actually, I've been thinking about cutting back on those. Maybe trying intermittent fasting. Her hand paused on my water glass. Oh, honey, no. That's just a fad diet. You need consistent nutrition, especially with your health issues. Besides, you love my smoothies. The way she said it, not quite a question, not quite a statement. Like she was reminding me of something I'd forgotten. I forced a smile. You're right. Thanks, Mom. That night, I lay in my childhood bed surrounded by the same yellow walls I'd stared at through countless sick days, and started making a timeline. I pulled out a notebook and began writing down everything I could remember. Age 16, started getting severe stomach cramps during finals week. Mom brought me ginger tea and homemade crackers every day. Missed 3 exams. Age 18, mysterious mono-like symptoms the week before college orientation. Too weak to move into the dorms on schedule. Commuted from home instead. Age 21, food poisoning that lasted 2 weeks, right after I'd gotten accepted to study abroad in Florence. Had to withdraw from the program. Age 24, the worst episode yet, hospitalized for internal bleeding. Happened 3 days after I'd gotten a job offer in Seattle. Mom stayed by my bedside, holding my hand, telling me how grateful she was that I was safe at home where she could watch over me. The pattern was so clear now I couldn't believe I'd missed it. Every time I'd shown signs of independence, of building a life that might take me away from her, I'd gotten sick. Not just regular sick, devastatingly, mysteriously ill in ways that forced me back into her care. I grabbed my laptop and started researching warfarin poisoning. The symptoms matched perfectly: fatigue, bruising, nosebleeds, hair loss, digestive problems. Chronic low-level exposure could cause all of my issues without being immediately life-threatening. Just enough to keep me weak. Just enough to keep me home. The cruelest part was how she'd weaponized my trust. I'd eaten everything she'd given me gratefully, believing she was the only person who truly understood my health problems. She'd even come with me to doctor appointments, taking notes, asking follow-up questions, playing the devoted mother advocating for her sick daughter. At 2 a.m., I found myself on a forum for adult children of narcissistic parents. I'd never thought to look there before. Mom wasn't like the obvious monsters people described, with their screaming and violence. She was subtle. Patient. She'd spent over a decade slowly stealing my life while convincing me she was saving it. I closed the laptop and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow, she'd make me a smoothie. Tomorrow, she'd expect me to drink it with a smile and thank her for taking such good care of me. But not anymore. The next morning, I watched Mom measure protein powder into the blender with the precision of a pharmacist. 2 scoops of vanilla whey, 1 cup of almond milk, half a banana, and a tablespoon of what she called her special vitamin blend, a gray powder she kept in an unmarked mason jar in the back of the pantry. The secret ingredient, she'd always said with a wink when I was younger. My grandmother's recipe for strong bones and healthy blood. Now I knew what kind of blood she was really talking about. Thin blood. Blood that wouldn't clot properly. I sat at the kitchen counter, phone hidden in my lap, recording everything. The way she turned her body slightly to block my view when she added the gray powder. The careful way she measured it, exactly 1 tablespoon, leveled off with a knife. The satisfied smile that crossed her face before she hit the blend button. Here you go, sweetheart. She slid the glass across the counter, same cheerful yellow tumbler she'd been using for years. Drink up. You look peaked this morning. I lifted the smoothie to my lips, pretended to take a sip, then set it down. Actually, I need to tell you something. I got a call yesterday about a research position at the University of Oregon. Full funding, housing included. I'm thinking about applying. Her face went perfectly still. Oregon? That's quite far. Just a 3-hour flight. And it's exactly the kind of opportunity Professor Martinez said I should be looking for. I'd made up Professor Martinez on the spot, but Mom didn't know my graduate advisors well enough to catch the lie. Well. She forced brightness back into her voice. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. You know how these things stress your system. Remember what happened last time you took on too much? Last time. She met my thesis defense when I'd been too weak to stand for more than 10 minutes. When I'd stumbled through my presentation, nose bleeding onto my note cards, and barely passed. I remember. I picked up the smoothie again, swirled it around. But maybe I'm getting stronger. I've been feeling really good lately. More energy than I've had in years. It was true. I'd been avoiding Mom's cooking for exactly 18 hours, and already the persistent fog in my head was starting to lift. Or maybe it was just clarity, the difference between being sick and being systematically poisoned. That's wonderful, honey, but we both know you have good days and bad days. The important thing is not to overextend yourself. She gestured toward my untouched smoothie. Finish that up. You need the nutrition. I stared at the pale yellow mixture. How many times had I drained glasses just like this one? How many opportunities had I lost while my mother literally poisoned my future, 1 tablespoon at a time? You know what's funny? I said, still holding the glass. I was reading about warfarin yesterday. For a paper I'm writing about medical advances in the 1940s. Mom's hand froze halfway to her coffee cup. Interesting stuff, I continued. Originally developed as rat poison, but then doctors figured out it could be used as a blood thinner for humans. Amazing how something so helpful in small doses can be so dangerous when you get too much. That's nice, dear. Her voice was carefully neutral now. Medicine is fascinating. The symptoms of poisoning are really subtle at first. Fatigue, bruising, bleeding that won't stop. A person could be taking it for months or even years without realizing what was happening to them. Mom stood abruptly and walked to the sink. Well, I'm sure your professors know all about that sort of thing. Now drink your smoothie before it gets warm. There it was, the edge beneath the sweetness. The same tone she'd used when I was 8 and refusing to eat vegetables. Compliance expected, no discussion allowed. I lifted the glass one more time, brought it close to my lips. Thanks, Mom. For everything. Then I poured the entire smoothie into the potted fern beside my chair. The fern's leaves turned pale yellow within minutes. I watched the plant like it was a science experiment, which I suppose it was. The protein smoothie pooled in the dark soil, and almost immediately the edges of the leaves began to curl and discolor. Mom had gone completely silent behind me at the sink, dish towel frozen in her hands. That's odd, I said conversationally. I've been feeding that fern water for years, and it's always been so healthy. When I turned around, Mom's face was perfectly composed again, but I caught the split second of panic before her mask slipped back into place. 28 years of reading her micro-expressions, and I'd finally learned what real fear looked like on her. Plants are sensitive, she said carefully. The protein might be too rich for it. I pulled out my phone, made a show of taking a photo of the dying plant. I should document this for my research. The effects are happening so fast. Mom's knuckles were white around the dish towel. What research? Oh, didn't I mention? I'm doing an independent study on toxicology this semester. Specifically tracking how small amounts of anticoagulants affect living organisms over time. I smiled at her, the same trusting smile I'd been giving her for years. Professor Chin in the chemistry department is helping me design controlled experiments. Professor Chin was real, though I'd never spoken to him about anything more complex than borrowing a pen. But Mom didn't know that. That sounds very advanced for library science, she said. I'm thinking about switching programs again. Maybe going back to pre-med after all. I stood and walked to the kitchen window, keeping my voice light. Turns out I might not be as constitutionally weak as we thought. My energy levels have been incredible these past few weeks. It was a lie, it had only been 1 day since I'd stopped eating her food, but I wanted to see her reaction. Weeks? Her voice pitched higher. But you've been having my smoothies every morning. Well, most mornings. I turned back to face her. Sometimes I grab coffee on campus instead. You know how chaotic grad school can be. She was quiet for a long moment, studying my face. I could practically see her trying to calculate when I'd been consuming her special vitamin blend and when I hadn't. Whether my supposed energy could be explained by reduced dosing. Sarah, she said finally, I want to talk to you about something. My heart started racing, but I kept my expression curious and open. Sure, Mom. She sat down at the kitchen table and patted the chair beside her. The same chair where she'd held my hair back during countless episodes of nausea. Where she'd taken my temperature and checked my pulse and made concerned noises about my episodes. "I've been thinking about your health," she began. "All these years of problems, and the doctors have never found a real answer." "That's true. I think," she paused, choosing her words carefully, "I think there might be something environmental making you sick. Something in your apartment, maybe. Or stress from school." I could see where this was heading. She was going to suggest I move home permanently. Give up graduate school entirely. Let her take care of me full-time while she slowly killed me with kindness and rat poison. "That's interesting," I said. "What kind of environmental factor?" "Well, old buildings can have mold. Lead paint. All sorts of toxins that build up in your system gradually." She reached across the table and took my hand. Her palm was damp with sweat. "I think you should move back home for a while. Just until we can figure out what's been making you so sick." Her grip tightened when I didn't respond immediately. "I know you value your independence, sweetheart, but your health has to come first. And honestly, I worry about you living alone when you never know when an episode might hit." The word episode had always made my illness sound psychological. Vague. Something that happened to me rather than something being done to me. "You're probably right," I said slowly. "It would be good to eliminate variables." Relief flooded her face. "Exactly. We'll get to the bottom of this. Actually, Mom, can I ask you something?" I pulled my phone out again, ostensibly to check the time. The recording app was still running. "Where do you keep that vitamin powder you put in my smoothies? The special blend from your grandmother's recipe?" "Oh, that's just in the pantry. Nothing special." "Could I see the container? I want to research the ingredients, make sure there's nothing I might be allergic to." For the first time since I'd known her, my mother looked genuinely rattled. It's just basic vitamins, honey. Calcium, iron, that sort of thing." "I'm sure it is. But Professor Chen says even basic supplements can cause problems if someone has an underlying sensitivity." I stood up, started walking toward the pantry. "It'll just take a second to write down the ingredient list." "Sarah, wait." I stopped, hand on the pantry door. "What's wrong, Mom?" She was gripping the edge of the table now, knuckles white again. I think maybe we should make that doctor's appointment after all. Have Dr. Patterson run some blood work." "That's a great idea," I said. "I'll call him this afternoon." What she didn't know was that I'd already made an appointment. For tomorrow morning. And I'd specifically requested a full toxicology panel. The next morning, I sat in Dr. Patterson's waiting room at 8 a.m. sharp, the earliest appointment I could get. My hands kept shaking as I filled out the intake forms, so I gripped the pen tighter and focused on writing clearly. Under reason for visit, I wrote, requesting comprehensive toxicology screening due to suspected poisoning. The nurse who called me back was new. I didn't recognize her from my previous visits. Good. I needed someone without preconceptions about Sarah Mitchell, the chronically ill girl whose mother always accompanied her to appointments. "Dr. Patterson will be right with you," she said, taking my vitals. My blood pressure was elevated, but given what I was about to do, that seemed reasonable. Dr. Patterson entered with the same kind smile he'd worn throughout my adolescence, chart in hand. "Sarah, good to see you. Your mother mentioned you wanted some blood work done?" My stomach dropped. "She called you?" "This morning, yes. She's concerned about some new symptoms you've been having?" He consulted his notes. "Anxiety, paranoid thoughts, difficulty concentrating. She thinks it might be related to your chronic fatigue syndrome." Of course. She'd gotten here first, laid the groundwork. Now anything I said would sound like the delusions of an unstable patient. "Dr. Patterson, I need you to test me for anticoagulant poisoning. Specifically warfarin." He blinked, pen hovering over his prescription pad. "That's a very specific request. What makes you think you've been exposed to rat poison?" "I found it. In my mother's closet." I pulled out my phone, showed him the photos. This box, with a receipt dated March 2019. That's when I had the bleeding episodes that put me in the ER. He studied the images, frowning. "Sarah, this is a very serious accusation. Poisoning by a family member is extremely rare. Are you sure there isn't another explanation?" "She's been putting something in my food. Every morning, she makes me smoothies with a gray powder she keeps in an unmarked jar. She calls it vitamins, but the symptoms match warfarin poisoning perfectly." Dr. Patterson set down his phone and leaned forward. "I've known your mother for 15 years. She's brought you to every appointment, advocated for every test, pushed for referrals when I thought they were unnecessary. The idea that she would deliberately harm you is exactly what she'd want you to think." I could hear the desperation creeping into my voice. "Please. Just run the blood test. If I'm wrong, it'll show nothing and we can explore other causes. But if I'm right." He was quiet for a long moment, studying my face. Finally, he sighed. "Sarah, I'm going to be honest with you. Your mother called because she's worried about your mental state. She said you've been having paranoid episodes, accusing her of poisoning your food, talking about conspiracy theories. It's not paranoid if it's actually happening. She also mentioned that you've been skipping meals, refusing to eat anything she prepares. She's concerned you might be developing an eating disorder with paranoid features." The room felt like it was tilting. She covered every angle, anticipated exactly what I would do and made sure she got to Dr. Patterson first. How long had she been planning this conversation? Had she always known that someday I might figure it out? "Dr. Patterson, please. Just test my blood for warfarin metabolites. That's all I'm asking." He made a note in my chart. "I'll run a comprehensive metabolic panel, which will show if there are any concerning values. But Sarah, I also think you should consider talking to someone about the stress you've been under. Your mother mentioned you're considering a move to Oregon for school?" Even that. She told him about Oregon, probably framed it as me becoming erratic and making impulsive decisions about my future. "The blood test," I said firmly. "Can you order it or not?" "I can order it." His tone was careful now, the way people spoke to psychiatric patients they were trying not to agitate. "But I want you to promise me something." If these tests come back normal, will you consider that there might be other explanations for how you've been feeling? I wanted to scream that there were no other explanations, that I'd lived in my own body for 28 years and knew the difference between chronic illness and systematic poisoning. Instead, I nodded. Good. Let's get you over to the lab. As the phlebotomist drew vial after vial of blood, I realized that this test would either vindicate me completely or destroy what little credibility I had left. If warfarin showed up in my system, I'd have proof. If it didn't. Well, if it didn't, then maybe I really was losing my mind. The lab results took 3 days to come back. 3 days of avoiding Mom's cooking while she watched me with increasing concern, suggesting we schedule an urgent psychiatric evaluation. 3 days of me living on campus vending machine food and takeout, telling her I had a stomach bug. Your appetite's been so poor lately, she said Tuesday night, hovering in the kitchen doorway while I picked at a sandwich I'd made myself. Are you sure you don't want some soup? I had that chicken and rice recipe you used to love. I'm fine, Mom. Just tired. You look pale. Thinner. She stepped closer, and I caught a whiff of her perfume, white shoulders, the same scent she'd worn my entire life. Maybe we should go to the ER. Sometimes stomach bugs can cause dehydration faster than you'd think. I almost laughed. After years of her creating medical emergencies, now she was trying to manufacture one when I was finally getting healthy. Wednesday morning, Dr. Patterson's office called. Sarah? This is Nancy from Dr. Patterson's office. Your lab results are in. Could you come in this afternoon around 2 p.m. to discuss them? My hands went numb around the phone. Can you tell me anything now? The doctor prefers to go over results in person. I spent the next 4 hours in a state of suspended animation, unable to focus on my thesis research, unable to eat. Either I was about to be vindicated, or I was about to be committed for psychiatric evaluation. There didn't seem to be any middle ground. At 1:45 p.m., I sat in the same waiting room chair, leg bouncing with nervous energy. This time, when Dr. Patterson called me back, his expression was unreadable. Your blood work came back, he said without preamble, closing the door behind us. And? He sat down heavily, suddenly looking older than his 60-odd years. Sarah, I owe you an apology. Your PT/INR levels are significantly elevated, and we found warfarin metabolites in your system. Levels consistent with chronic exposure over an extended period. The room started spinning. Even though I'd known, had been certain, hearing it confirmed made everything real in a way that photographs and dead plants couldn't. How long? I whispered. Based on the metabolite concentrations, I'd estimate months of regular exposure. Possibly longer. He rubbed his forehead. The dosing appears to have been carefully calibrated, enough to cause your symptoms without triggering obvious hemorrhaging that would immediately point to anticoagulant poisoning. My mom called you before my appointment. She knew I was going to ask for this test. Dr. Patterson nodded slowly. In 15 years of practice, I've never had a mother try to preemptively discredit her daughter's abuse allegations. It should have been a red flag. Abuse allegations. Hearing him say it out loud made it real. My mother hadn't just been controlling or overprotective. She'd been systematically abusing me for over a decade, and she'd been so careful about it that even I hadn't recognized it until now. What do I do? I asked. First, we get you completely away from the source of exposure. Do you have somewhere safe to stay? I thought about my apartment near campus, the lease I'd been planning to break to move back home permanently. Yes. My own place. Good. Don't eat anything she's prepared, don't accept any food or drinks from her. The warfarin should clear your system within a few days to a week. He paused. Sarah, this is a criminal matter. You need to contact the police. Police. The word hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just about my health anymore, this was about putting my mother in jail. What if they don't believe me? You have medical evidence now. And I'll testify to both your test results and her attempt to discredit you beforehand. His voice was gentle but firm. No one should have to live through what you've experienced. I left his office with a copy of my lab results and Detective Maria Santos' direct phone number. Dr. Patterson had called ahead, explained the situation. She was expecting to hear from me. But first, I had to go home and pack my things. And I had to do it while Mom was still expecting me to move in permanently, still believing she'd successfully painted me as mentally unstable. I had no idea she was already 3 steps ahead of me. I pulled into Mom's driveway at 4:30 p.m., lab results folded in my jacket pocket like a shield. The house looked exactly the same as it had that morning, white shutters, perfectly manicured flower beds, the ceramic garden gnome I'd given her for Mother's Day in 3rd grade. Such a normal house for such an abnormal secret. Mom met me at the door before I could even use my key. There you are. I was starting to worry. She studied my face with that practiced maternal concern. How did your appointment go? What did Dr. Patterson say? Just some routine blood work. Results should be back in a few days. The lie came easily. I'd had years of practice hiding things from her, though I'd never realized she was hiding much worse from me. Well, I have good news that might cheer you up. She stepped aside to let me in, practically vibrating with excitement. I called the University of Oregon while you were out. My blood went cold. You what? I spoke with someone in their graduate admissions office. Explained your situation, the chronic health issues, the pattern of stress-related episodes whenever you take on too much. Her smile was radiant, proud. They were so understanding. They agreed it would be better if you withdrew your application before the committee review. That way it won't show as a rejection on your academic record. I stared at her, speechless. She destroyed my Oregon opportunity in the span of a single phone call. How long had she been doing things like this? How many jobs, schools, relationships had she sabotaged while I thought I was just unlucky? I didn't submit an application to Oregon yet. Well, no, but you were planning to. And in your current state of health, it would have been a disaster. She touched my arm gently. I saved you from setting yourself up for failure, sweetheart. My current state of health is fine, Mom. Her hand tightened slightly on my arm. Dr. Patterson called me after your appointment. He's very concerned about your mental state. The paranoid thoughts, the accusations you've been making. Of course he'd called her. Even after finding warfarin in my blood, he'd still felt obligated to notify my emergency contact. Standard protocol that she was counting on. What exactly did he tell you? I asked carefully. That you've been having some troubling delusions. Believing that someone is poisoning you. Her voice dropped to a stage whisper, as if sharing a confidence. Honey, I think the stress of graduate school has been too much for your system. Dr. Patterson agrees that you need intensive treatment. What kind of treatment? She guided me toward the living room, her hand still on my arm. There's a wonderful residential facility about 2 hours from here. Peaceful Meadows. They specialize in young adults who've had psychotic breaks triggered by academic pressure. Psychotic breaks. She'd upgraded me from chronically ill to mentally unstable in a single afternoon. I don't need residential treatment, Mom. The application is already submitted. I had to act fast. They had a bed available starting Monday, but only if we could guarantee admission by Friday. She sat down on the couch, patting the cushion beside her. I know it seems scary, but Dr. Patterson thinks 6 months of intensive therapy could really help you get back on track. 6 months. Long enough for the warfarin to completely clear my system, for any physical evidence to disappear. Long enough for her to dispose of the poison, clean out the vitamin jar, establish a paper trail of my supposed mental illness. I'm not going to Peaceful Meadows. Sarah, you don't really have a choice. Her voice was still gentle, but there was steel underneath now. Dr. Patterson is prepared to sign a 72-hour psychiatric hold if necessary. But I'd much rather we handle this as a family. A psychiatric hold. She'd researched the exact legal mechanism to override my autonomy. How long had she been planning this contingency? And if I refuse? Then Dr. Patterson has documented evidence that you're a danger to yourself. The paranoid delusions, the refusal to eat, the weight loss. She reached into her purse and pulled out a manila folder. I've been keeping track of your episodes for years, sweetheart. Every hospitalization, every missed opportunity because of your health. It shows a clear pattern of deterioration. I opened the folder with shaking hands. Page after page of her handwritten notes, dated and detailed. My supposed symptoms, behaviors, concerning statements. A comprehensive record of my mental decline that read like clinical documentation. March 15, 2019, Sarah experiencing severe paranoia about food safety. Refused to eat dinner, claimed it smelled wrong. Increasing social isolation and academic problems. She'd been building this case for years, every entry crafted to support a narrative of psychological instability rather than systematic poisoning. You've been planning this for a long time, I whispered. I've been trying to help you for a long time, she corrected. But you keep getting worse instead of better. I looked up at her face, the same loving expression she'd worn while feeding me rat poison for over a decade. She actually believed she was saving me. In her mind, I was sick, fragile, incapable of surviving without her protection. And if I ever figured out the truth, well, that just proved I was delusional. I want to call Dr. Patterson myself, I said. Of course, honey. But he's already made his recommendation. She stood up, smoothing her skirt. Now, why don't you go pack a bag? Just essentials for the first week. Peaceful Meadows will provide most of what you need. I walked upstairs to my childhood bedroom on unsteady legs, phone clutched in my hand. Detective Santos' number was programmed in my contacts, but how could I call the police from inside the house? And what if Mom was right about the psychiatric hold? What if Dr. Patterson really would have me committed before I could present my evidence? In my room, I started throwing clothes into a duffel bag while my mind raced. She'd outmaneuvered me completely, turned my own doctor against me, eliminated my escape routes. But she'd made one mistake. She didn't know I had the lab results yet. I sat on my childhood bed, staring at my half-packed bag, when I heard Mom's footsteps on the stairs. Heavy, purposeful steps that meant she was bringing something up to me. I shoved the lab results deeper into my jacket pocket just as she appeared in the doorway, carrying a steaming mug. I made you some chamomile tea, she said, setting it on my nightstand. With honey, the way you like it. I thought it might help you relax before we drive to Peaceful Meadows tomorrow. The mug was my favorite from childhood, white ceramic with faded pink roses. How many times had she brought me tea in that exact cup during my episodes? I'd always thought it was such a sweet, motherly gesture. Tomorrow? I thought you said Monday. I called back and they had a cancellation. We can get you admitted first thing Saturday morning. She sat down on the edge of my bed, close enough that I could smell her white shoulders' perfume mixed with something else, something chemical and bitter. I know this feels sudden, but Dr. Patterson thinks the sooner the better. The tea sat between us, steam curling up from the surface. I could see dark specks floating in the honey-colored liquid. Her special blend again, probably a higher concentration since this might be her last chance to dose me before I disappeared into residential treatment for 6 months. Mom, can I ask you something? Of course, sweetheart. Do you remember when I was 17 and got accepted to that summer pre-med program at Johns Hopkins? Her face didn't change, but I caught the slight tightening around her eyes. Vaguely. Why? I got sick a week before I was supposed to leave. Really sick, ended up in the ER with internal bleeding. You stayed with me the whole time, held my hand while they ran tests. You were so frightened, she said softly. I couldn't leave my baby alone in that hospital. The doctors never figured out what caused the bleeding. Sometimes these things just happen. Your body has always been delicate. She glanced at the untouched tea. You should drink that while it's warm. I've been thinking about that night a lot lately. How you cried when the doctor said I couldn't travel for at least a month. How devastated you were that I'd missed the program. This was a test. I remember that night clearly. Mom hadn't cried at all. She'd been calm, almost relieved when the doctor delivered his verdict. She'd immediately started talking about how maybe it was a sign that I should stay close to home. I was heartbroken for you, she said, but her voice sounded rehearsed. All your dreams of medical school, put on hold again. Again? Well, you know. After the motto your freshman year, and that terrible food poisoning when you were 21. She reached over and wrapped her fingers around the mug, pushing it slightly toward me. Life kept getting in the way of your ambitions. Life. As if my illness was some cosmic force instead of blue pellets measured into my food by her own hands. I never told you this, I said, but I kept a journal back then. About my symptoms, when they started, how long they lasted. I thought it might help doctors find a pattern. That was a lie. I'd never been organized enough to keep a symptom journal. But her reaction told me everything I needed to know. Her grip tightened on the mug and her smile became fixed, artificial. That sounds very thorough of you. I was looking at it yesterday, actually. The most interesting thing was the timing. I never got sick during random weeks or months. It was always right before something important. College interviews, job opportunities, that study abroad program junior year. I met her eyes. Almost like someone was paying very close attention to my schedule. The silence stretched between us. Finally, she lifted the mug and held it out to me. Your tea's getting cold, Sarah. It wasn't a suggestion anymore. I stared at the mug in her outstretched hand, steam still rising from the surface. The dark specks had settled to the bottom now, creating a thin sediment layer that looked innocent enough if you didn't know what you were looking for. I'm not really thirsty right now, Mom. Her arm didn't waver. Dr. Patterson specifically recommended chamomile tea to help with your anxiety. He said it's important that you get some rest before tomorrow. Funny thing about Dr. Patterson, I said, pulling my phone out. He actually gave me his direct line today. Said I could call him anytime if I had questions about my treatment plan. That was true. He'd written his personal number on the back of his business card, told me to contact him immediately if I felt unsafe. At the time, I thought he meant physically unsafe from the warfarin. Now I realized he might have meant something else entirely. I started dialing. Mom watched me for exactly 3 rings before she spoke. Sarah, put the phone down. Something in her voice had changed. The warmth was gone, replaced by a flat authority I'd heard maybe a dozen times in my life. Usually when I was much younger and had pushed her past the limits of her patience. I just want to ask him about the timeline for Peaceful Meadows. Make sure we have all the details right. Put the phone down. Dr. Patterson picked up on the 4th ring. Sarah? Is everything all right? Hi, Dr. Patterson. I'm here with my mom and we're trying to coordinate about tomorrow. She said you recommended I be admitted to Peaceful Meadows as early as possible? There was a pause. Sarah, where are you right now? At my mom's house. She's right here if you want to speak with her. Listen to me carefully. After we spoke this afternoon, I did some research on Peaceful Meadows. That facility doesn't exist. My blood turned to ice water. What? There's no residential treatment center by that name anywhere in the state or the surrounding area. I never recommended any psychiatric facility. Mom lunged for the phone, but I was faster. I rolled off the bed and backed toward the window, keeping the device pressed to my ear. She has paperwork, I said. Admission forms, intake documents. Sarah, you need to leave that house immediately. Do you have your car keys? Mom stood up slowly, her face completely transformed. The loving maternal expression was gone, replaced by something cold and calculating that I'd never seen before. This was who she really was underneath 15 years of performance. Dr. Patterson wants to talk to you, I said, holding out the phone. She didn't take it. Hang up, Sarah. He says Peaceful Meadows doesn't exist. Hang up the phone and drink your tea. The tea has rat poison in it, doesn't it? Just like the smoothies. Just like everything you've been feeding me since I was 16 years old. For the first time in my life, my mother didn't deny something I'd accused her of. She just stood there, perfectly still, watching me with those cold stranger's eyes. Sarah, are you still there? Dr. Patterson's voice was tinny through the phone speaker. Yes, I'm here. I'm calling 911. Stay on the line with me and get out of that house right now. Mom moved then, faster than I'd ever seen her move. She grabbed the ceramic mug and hurled it at the wall beside my head. It shattered in an explosion of poison tea and porcelain shards, dark liquid running down the yellow wallpaper like blood. You ungrateful little bitch, she hissed. Do you have any idea what I've sacrificed for you? How much of my life I've given up to keep you safe? And there it was. Finally. The truth underneath 28 years of lies. I backed against the window, phone still pressed to my ear, staring at the woman who'd raised me. The mask had finally slipped completely, and what was underneath was terrifying, not because it was violent or obviously monstrous, but because it was so utterly rational. Keep you safe? I whispered. You've been poisoning me for 12 years. I've been protecting you from a world that would have chewed you up and spit you out. She stepped over the broken ceramic, her voice deadly calm now. Do you think you would have survived medical school? The stress, the competition, the 100-hour weeks? You would have had a breakdown by Christmas. That wasn't your choice to make. It was exactly my choice to make. I'm your mother. She moved closer, and I could see flecks of tea on her white cardigan, evidence of how far her control had slipped. I watched my sister destroy herself chasing some fantasy career in New York. Nervous breakdown at 30, 2 failed marriages, died alone in a studio apartment with empty wine bottles and unpaid bills. Sarah? Dr. Patterson's voice crackled through the phone. Talk to me. Are you safe? I don't know, I said honestly. Mom's laugh was bitter. Safe? You want to know about safe? Safe is having someone who loves you enough to make the hard choices. Safe is not ending up like Rebecca, or like your father's worthless brother, or like any of the other family members who thought they were too good for a quiet, stable life. You killed Dad's brother? Don't be ridiculous. Uncle Mark killed himself with ambition and stress, just like everyone else who refuses to accept their limitations. She was close enough now that I could see the broken capillaries around her nose, the fine lines that makeup couldn't quite cover. I simply learned from other people's mistakes. Behind her, I could hear sirens in the distance. Dr. Patterson had made good on his promise to call 911. They're coming, I said. Let them come. Mom's voice was eerily serene now. What exactly do you think they're going to find? A loving mother who spent decades caring for her chronically ill daughter. Medical records going back to your teens documenting your health problems. A recent psychiatric evaluation showing dangerous paranoid delusions. They'll find warfarin in my blood. Will they? According to my research, warfarin metabolites clear the system within 72 to 96 hours of last exposure. She glanced at her watch, a delicate gold piece I'd given her for her 50th birthday. You refused your smoothie Wednesday morning. It's now Friday evening. By the time they process your blood work, assuming they even believe your story enough to test for it, you'll be clean. The sirens were getting closer. I could see red and blue lights starting to reflect off the neighbors' windows across the street. The box in your closet. What box? Her smile was serene. I disposed of that old rat poison months ago when the basement got fumigated. As for my vitamin powder, well, that's exactly what it is now. Perfectly harmless calcium and iron supplement that I ordered online this afternoon while you were at your appointment. She thought of everything. Every piece of evidence, every possible angle the police might pursue. How long had she been preparing for this moment? Sarah, the police are outside, Dr. Patterson said through the phone. Can you get to the front door? Mom stepped aside, gesturing toward the hallway with mock politeness. By all means, sweetheart. Go tell the nice officers how your mother has been systematically poisoning you. Show them your evidence. I moved toward the door, legs shaking, and she followed at a distance, close enough to hear every word I said, far enough to look non-threatening when the police saw us together. Just remember, she called softly as I reached the stairs, I have 15 years of medical records and witness testimony about your fragile mental state. You have a story that sounds like a Lifetime movie and a dying houseplant. The doorbell rang as I reached the front hall, and I realized she was probably right. I opened the front door to find two police officers, a tall black woman and a shorter white man, both looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. Behind them, an ambulance sat in the driveway with its lights flashing but no siren. Sarah Mitchell? The female officer asked. I'm Detective Santos, this is Officer Rodriguez. Dr. Patterson called about a possible poisoning situation? Yes, that's right. My mother has been. Now hold on, Mom interrupted, appearing beside me with tears already streaming down her face. The transformation was instantaneous, shoulders hunched, voice trembling, the picture of a distraught parent. Officers, I'm so grateful you're here. My daughter has been having severe paranoid episodes. She's refusing to eat, making wild accusations. Detective Santos looked between us, taking in Mom's tear-stained cheeks and my probably manic appearance. I was still holding Dr. Patterson's business card in one hand and my phone in the other, my hair disheveled from our confrontation upstairs. Ma'am, we'd like to speak with each of you separately, Santos said. Is there somewhere private we can talk with Sarah first? Of course, anything to help her. Mom gestured toward the living room. I'll wait in the kitchen. Take all the time you need. As she walked away, I caught her subtle glance at the manila folder still sitting on the coffee table, her 15 years of documented evidence about my mental state. Detective Santos and Officer Rodriguez followed me into the living room. Santos pulled out a small recording device while Rodriguez positioned himself by the window, probably watching for any signs that I might become violent or unstable. Sarah, Dr. Patterson says you believe someone has been poisoning you with warfarin. Can you walk me through what led you to that conclusion? I took a shaky breath and started with finding the box in Mom's closet. Santos listened without interrupting while I explained about the timing of my illnesses, the smoothies, the dead plant. When I got to the part about Dr. Patterson finding warfarin in my blood, she held up a hand. When was this blood drawn? Wednesday morning. The results came back this afternoon. And you last consumed food prepared by your mother when? My heart sank as I realized what she was getting at. Tuesday night. No, wait, I had coffee Wednesday morning that she made, but I poured most of it out. Santos and Rodriguez exchanged a look. So approximately 60 hours ago? Dr. Patterson said warfarin clears the system in 72 to 96 hours, I said desperately. If you test my blood right now, there should still be metabolites. We can arrange for another blood draw, Santos said carefully. But I need to ask, do you have any physical evidence of this alleged poisoning? The warfarin container you mentioned? It was in her bedroom closet. A blue box with a receipt from March 2019. I pulled out my phone, scrolled to the photos. I took pictures. Santos studied the images while Rodriguez leaned over her shoulder. After a moment, she looked up. Sarah, these photos show an empty rat poison container and a receipt. They don't prove that the contents were used to poison you. But the timing matches exactly with when I was hospitalized for bleeding. Which could be a coincidence. Her voice was gentle but firm. Without the actual container or samples of the contaminated food, photographs aren't enough to pursue criminal charges. From the kitchen, I could hear Mom opening and closing cabinets, probably getting rid of the vitamin jar while we spoke. She was covering her tracks in real time, and there was nothing I could do to stop her. What about her trying to have me committed to a fake psychiatric facility? Dr. Patterson mentioned that. We'll definitely follow up on those claims. Santos made a note. Do you have the paperwork she showed you? I thought about the manila folder sitting 10 feet away, filled with years of carefully crafted documentation that would make me look delusional rather than abused. It's complicated, I said weakly. Officer Rodriguez spoke for the first time. Ma'am, with respect, Dr. Patterson also mentioned that your mother called him today expressing concerns about your mental health. Are you currently taking any psychiatric medications? And there it was. Even with the doctor's support and medical evidence, I was still being treated like a potentially unstable person whose accusations couldn't be trusted. No medications. But I can prove she's been lying about the treatment facility. We'll check on that, Santos assured me. In the meantime, do you have somewhere safe to stay tonight? Away from this house? At least they were taking that part seriously. Yes, my apartment near campus. Good. I'd recommend staying there while we investigate. And Sarah? She handed me her card. If you feel threatened in any way, call immediately. As they prepared to interview Mom, I realized she'd won this round completely. The evidence was gone, my credibility was compromised, and she'd successfully painted me as a mentally ill daughter making desperate accusations against a loving mother. But she'd also made one crucial mistake. She'd revealed who she really was underneath the mask, and now I knew exactly what I was fighting. The police left after 45 minutes of interviewing Mom, who had performed flawlessly. I watched through the living room window as Detective Santos shook her hand, actually shook hands with my poisoner, and promised to look into everything thoroughly. Mom waved goodbye from the front porch like the concerned mother she'd always pretended to be, then closed the door and turned to face me. The mask was still off, her expression cold and calculating. Well, that was educational, she said, walking past me toward the kitchen. Did you really think they'd arrest me based on your little story? I followed her, phone still clutched in my hand. Through the kitchen window, I could see our neighbor Mrs. Chin peeking through her curtains. The police cars had drawn attention from the whole street. They're going to test my blood again, I said. Are they? Mom opened the cabinet under the sink and pulled out a fresh box of baking soda, the kind she used for cleaning. Even if they find traces, which I doubt after 60 hours, how will they prove where it came from? You eat at restaurants, campus dining halls, coffee shops. Contamination could have happened anywhere. She was right, and we both knew it. Without the original warfarin container or samples of the contaminated food, any traces in my blood were circumstantial at best. You can't keep doing this forever, I said. Someone will figure it out eventually. Will they? She ran water in the sink and started scrubbing the tea stain from the wall where the mug had shattered. I've been perfecting this approach for 12 years, Sarah. The key is patience and documentation. Every doctor's visit, every episode, every missed opportunity, all carefully recorded as evidence of your declining mental health. I watched her clean, methodical, and thorough, erasing evidence of her momentary loss of control. Why are you telling me this? Because you need to understand your situation. She wrung out the sponge and turned to face me. The police won't help you. The doctors already think you're unstable. Your academic advisors will hear about tonight's psychiatric emergency by Monday morning. The implications hit me like a physical blow. She was right, news of a police wellness check would spread through my small graduate program within days. Professor Martinez, my thesis advisor, would start questioning my fitness to complete the program. Other students would whisper about Sarah Mitchell's breakdown. You're going to destroy my entire academic career. I'm going to save you from destroying yourself. She folded the cleaning cloth with precise corners. You can fight me, and spend the next several years labeled as mentally ill while your reputation crumbles. Or you can accept help and let me take care of you the way I always have. Help? You call systematic poisoning help? I call preventing my daughter from making catastrophic life choices help. She moved closer, and for a moment her expression softened into something that might have been genuine emotion. Sarah, you have no idea how cruel the world is. How many people are just waiting to exploit someone with your trusting nature? Like you've been exploiting me? The softness vanished. Like your father tried to exploit you. Did you know he wanted to take you away from me when you were 7? Said I was overprotective, that you needed to learn independence. I'd never heard this story before. Dad wanted to leave you? He wanted to take you to California, get joint custody. Said you needed exposure to different perspectives. Her laugh was bitter. 3 months later, he had his heart attack. 42 years old, perfect health, dead from stress and overwork. That's what independence gets you. The timeline didn't make sense. Dad had died when I was 16, not 7. But before I could point out the inconsistency, she continued. I learned then that the only way to protect someone you love is to make sure they never have to face those dangers alone. Every choice I've made has been to keep you safe from your father's fate. Dad died of a heart defect. The doctors said it was genetic, unavoidable. Mom's smile was sharp as broken glass. Did they? Or is that just what I told you because 16 was too young to understand the truth about what killed him? The words hit me like ice water. What are you talking about? Mom leaned against the kitchen counter, studying my face with clinical interest. Your father didn't have a heart defect, Sarah. He had a heart attack brought on by chronic stress and a blood condition that made him prone to clotting. My legs felt weak. I gripped the back of a kitchen chair to steady myself. What blood condition? Hyperhomocystinemia. Elevated levels of homocysteine in the blood, which increases the risk of cardiovascular events. She spoke like she was reciting from a medical textbook. It's hereditary. You have it too. That's impossible. I've had blood work done dozens of times. For warfarin metabolites, yes. For complete cardiovascular panels, no. Her smile was patient, almost pitying. Dr. Patterson has been monitoring your basic metabolic functions, but I specifically requested that he avoid comprehensive cardiac screenings. I told him you had anxiety about heart problems after your father's death. The room started spinning. You've been hiding a genetic condition from me for 12 years? I've been managing a genetic condition for 12 years. The warfarin isn't poison, sweetheart, it's medicine. Low-dose anticoagulant therapy to prevent the clots that killed your father. She moved to the refrigerator and pulled out a manila folder I'd never seen before. I've been keeping detailed records of your dosing schedule, coordinating with a hematologist in Portland who specializes in hereditary clotting disorders. She opened the folder and spread papers across the kitchen table. Medical charts, dosing calculations, what looked like legitimate correspondence with Dr. Rebecca Chan, MD, Pacific Northwest Hematology Associates. This is insane, I whispered, but I was already scanning the documents. They looked real, official letterhead, medical terminology, specific recommendations for patient SM with my birth date and symptoms. Insane is letting your daughter die at 42 because you were too proud to accept medical intervention. Mom's voice was steady, reasonable. Your father refused to take blood thinners. Said they made him feel weak, that he'd rather live free than live in fear. 3 months later, he was dead. I stared at a letter dated 6 months ago, Dr. Chen's neat handwriting recommending continued low-dose warfarin therapy, 2.5 milligrams daily, administered in divided doses to maintain therapeutic INR between 1.5 to 2.0. If this is real, why hide it? Why not just tell me I needed blood thinners? Because you're exactly like your father. She gathered the papers, straightening them with precise movements. Stubborn, prideful, convinced you know better than people who've spent their lives studying medicine. If I told you at 16 that you needed daily medication for the rest of your life, what would you have done? I thought about my teenage self, rebellious, desperate for independence, already chafing against Mom's protective restrictions. She was probably right that I would have refused. But the timing, I said desperately. I always got sicker before important events. Because stress triggers clotting episodes in people with your condition. Job interviews, college applications, relationship pressure, all of it raises your homocysteine levels and increases cardiovascular risk. She pulled out another document, a research paper about stress-induced thrombosis. I had to increase your dosing during high-stress periods to prevent potentially fatal complications. The evidence was overwhelming, professionally presented, internally consistent. Everything I'd interpreted as systematic poisoning could be explained as careful medical management of a hereditary condition. Dr. Patterson's blood work, I said weakly. He found warfarin in my system. Of course he did. You've been on therapeutic anticoagulation for 12 years. Mom's expression was gentle now, concerned. The question is why you suddenly decided that life-saving medication was poison. I felt the ground shifting under my feet, my entire reality rearranging itself. What if she was telling the truth? I stared at the medical document spread across the kitchen table, my hands shaking as I picked up what looked like a legitimate lab report. The letterhead was crisp, professional, Pacific Northwest Hematology Associates, Dr. Rebecca Chen, MD patient SM, DOB matching mine exactly, homocysteine levels consistently elevated over a 12-year period. Call her, I said suddenly. Call Dr. Chen right now. Mom blinked, momentarily thrown off balance. Sarah, it's nearly 7 p.m. on a Friday. Then call her emergency line. If I really have a life-threatening clotting disorder, she should be available for urgent consultations. I pulled out my phone. What's her direct number? I don't think that's necessary right now. You're clearly upset, and Dr. Chen specifically recommended avoiding stress-induced episodes. Mom. I looked directly into her eyes. Give me her phone number. For the first time since she'd started her medical explanation, Mom hesitated. It was barely a pause, maybe 2 seconds, but I caught it. The same micro-expression I'd seen when I'd asked about the vitamin powder earlier. Of course, she said finally, reaching for her own phone. Let me find her contact information. She scrolled through her contacts with exaggerated care, taking far too long for someone who'd supposedly been coordinating my medical care for over a decade. Finally, she turned the screen toward me. Here, Dr. Rebecca Chen, Pacific Northwest Hematology. I dialed the number immediately, putting it on speaker. After 4 rings, an automated voice answered, "Thank you for calling Pacific Northwest Hematology Associates. Our office hours are Monday through Friday 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. If this is a medical emergency, please hang up and call 911. No emergency line, I said. No after-hours contact. Most specialists don't offer 24-hour availability, Mom replied smoothly. We can call her office Monday morning. But I was already Googling Pacific Northwest Hematology Associates on my phone. The website looked legitimate, professional photos, staff bios, location in downtown Portland. DR. Rebecca Chen's photo showed an Asian woman in her 50s with kind eyes and an impressive list of credentials. Then I clicked on Patient Portal and tried to create an account using my name and birth date. Patient not found in our system. I tried variations, Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell, S. Mitchell, different birth dates in case she'd made an error. Nothing. The portal system might be outdated, Mom said, but I could hear the tension creeping into her voice. Or I've never been a patient there. I was already dialing directory assistance. Yes, I need the main number for Pacific Northwest Hematology Associates in Portland, Oregon. The operator connected me to the same automated system. But this time, I pressed 0 repeatedly until I reached an actual person, probably a cleaning service or security company that handled after-hours calls for the medical building. Hi, this is Sarah Mitchell. I'm trying to reach Dr. Rebecca Chen about an urgent question regarding my medication dosing. Do you have any way to contact her? Hold on, let me check our directory. There was a pause, the sound of pages turning. I'm sorry, but Dr. Chen is out of the country until next Friday. She's attending a medical conference in Geneva. Would you like to leave a message for when she returns? Out of the country. Unreachable for verification. Actually, I continued, could you tell me if Sarah Mitchell is listed as one of her patients? I'm having trouble accessing the portal system. I'm sorry, but I can't access patient information. You'd need to call during regular business hours and speak with the office staff. I hung up and looked at Mom, who was watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Convenient that Dr. Chen is unreachable for a week, I said. Medical conferences are scheduled months in advance, Sarah. The timing is coincidental. Maybe it was. Or maybe Mom had researched Dr. Chen's schedule, known she'd be unavailable for verification during this exact window. How far in advance had she been planning this backup story? I picked up one of the medical documents again, studying it more carefully. The dates, the dosing recommendations, the patient history, all of it perfectly aligned with my symptoms and timeline. But something felt wrong about the formatting, subtle inconsistencies in the font and spacing that made me think of high-quality forgeries. Mom, if I really have a clotting disorder, why haven't I had a single cardiovascular event in 28 years? Dad had his heart attack at 42, but I've never even had chest pains. Because, she said patiently, you've been on continuous anticoagulant therapy since you were 16. The medication is working exactly as intended. It was a perfect circular argument. I was healthy because of the warfarin, and I needed the warfarin because I had a condition that would make me unhealthy without it. Impossible to disprove without stopping the medication, which she'd convinced me would be potentially fatal. But she'd made one mistake in her elaborate story. She'd claimed my symptoms got worse during stressful periods because stress increased clotting risk. But warfarin was an anticoagulant. It prevented clots by thinning the blood. If I really had a clotting disorder, higher doses of warfarin should have made me feel better during stress, not worse. Instead, I'd always felt sickest right before important events, when she claimed to be increasing my dosage. That was exactly backwards from how the medication should work. I pulled out my phone again, this time calling Detective Santos directly. She answered on the second ring. Detective, this is Sarah Mitchell. I need to report something important about my mother's story. I put the call on speaker while Mom watched, her composed mask finally starting to crack. What kind of information, Sarah? She's claiming I have a hereditary clotting disorder and that the warfarin was medication, not poison. But her story doesn't make medical sense. I took a breath, organizing my thoughts. If I had a clotting disorder and needed blood thinners, higher doses should make me feel better, not worse. But I always felt sickest when she claimed to be increasing my medication before stressful events. There was a pause. That's a good point. Are you somewhere safe right now? I'm still at her house, but I'm about to leave. I looked directly at Mom as I spoke. Detective, I think she's been planning this backup story for years. Forged medical documents, researched doctors who would be unreachable for verification. This is sophisticated psychological manipulation. Mom's face had gone completely white. Sarah, you're having another paranoid episode. No, I interrupted. I'm thinking clearly for the first time in 12 years. I turned back to the phone. Detective Santos, can you contact the real Dr. Chen's office on Monday and verify whether I've ever been a patient? Absolutely. We'll also have a medical expert review the documents your mother showed you tonight. Documents? Mom's voice was sharp. I never. The papers are right here on the kitchen table, I said, taking photos of them with my phone. Complete medical history supposedly showing coordination with a hematologist for my clotting disorder. Detective Santos was quiet for a moment. Sarah, gather those documents and bring them to the station. Don't let your mother dispose of them. I started collecting the papers while Mom stood frozen, watching her elaborate backup plan crumble in real time. Detective, there's something else. She told me my father died of the same clotting condition, but earlier tonight she said he died when I was 7. Then she changed it to 16. She can't keep her own lies straight anymore. We'll check your father's death certificate and autopsy reports, Santos said. That should clarify the actual cause of death. Mom finally moved, lunging for the papers in my hands. You don't understand what you're doing. I stepped back, clutching the documents. I understand perfectly. You've been slowly poisoning me for 12 years to keep me dependent and isolated. When I found evidence, you tried to have me committed to a fake psychiatric facility. And when that failed, you created an elaborate medical backstory to explain away the warfarin. Sarah, I love you. You love controlling me, I corrected. There's a difference. Detective Santos spoke through the phone. I'm sending a unit to escort you from the house safely. They should be there in 10 minutes. As we waited for the police, I called Dr. Patterson on his direct line. Sarah, thank goodness. Are you all right? Dr. Patterson, my mother is claiming I have hereditary hyperhomocysteine and that the warfarin was therapeutic medication. Is that medically possible? Absolutely not, he said immediately. Sarah, I've been your physician since you were 16. We've never tested you for clotting disorders because you've never shown any cardiovascular risk factors. Your father died of a congenital heart defect. I have his medical records. There's no family history of clotting disorders. The relief was overwhelming. She forged medical documents from a hematologist in Portland. That's a federal crime, Dr. Patterson said grimly. Sarah, I want you to know, I should have recognized the signs years ago. Your symptom pattern was classic for chronic poisoning, but I trusted your mother's advocacy and missed the obvious explanation. When the police arrived this time, they handcuffed my mother and read her rights. As they led her to the patrol car, she turned back to me one final time. You'll never survive without me, she called out, her voice carrying across the quiet suburban street. You're too weak for the real world. But as I watched the police car drive away, I realized she was wrong. For the first time in my adult life, I felt strong. 6 months later, I'm finishing my thesis defense at the University of Oregon. Mom was sentenced to 15 years for aggravated assault and attempted murder. The warfarin is completely out of my system, and I haven't been sick once. Sometimes the person who claims to be protecting you is actually the thing you need protection from.